Hi, my name's Alex Holmes, and I'm the director of Maiden. And this is my audio commentary, and I'm going to be talking you through some of the background to the making of the film, telling you a little bit about some of the characters in it, how the film came to come about, and some of the challenges we faced and how we overcame them. So these opening shots are from the Southern Ocean, actually taken by an expeditionary team. It's very difficult to get pictures, good pictures of the sea and the Southern Ocean, but these were particularly dramatic, and we wanted to set the film up with this menace at the start, so that we didn't underplay the challenge that these women were about to take on. And by starting with this opening, you set a context for all the battles that they were going to face. So that the audience doesn't forget that the biggest battle they faced was actually against the ocean, which, as Tracy said, is always trying to kill you.
You're on your own. There is no hope if anything happens.
The film has a deliberately slow-paced opening to draw you in. It's an attempt to give you the different moods and tones of the films, and we come straight away to Tracy, our main character. These rushes were gold dust.
Hello, I'm Tracy Edwards, skipper of Maiden, the first all-female challenge.
You see the two sides of Tracy here, trying to put on a brave face, while at the same time that faltering insecurity and just how young she was, which I think is sometimes easy to forget when you put her in the context of these huge seas and the tremendous challenge she faced.
You have to be different than the normal bloke.
Bruno says there, one of our interviewees, you have to be different from the normal bloke. And one of the things we noticed as we put the film together was just how shot through so much of the language of sailing is, and the discourse of sailing is framed in male terms. And so we were keen to kind of keep those in the film because it kind of gave an interesting subtext to the battles that were going on.
And at 33,000 nautical miles, it is the longest race on Earth.
How many times are told we couldn't do it? You're not strong enough. You're not skilled enough. Girls don't get on. You'll all die. She put everything on the line. She risked everything for it to happen. There wasn't a choice. It was just something I had to do. My early years were idyllic. A world of magic and make-believe and two wonderful parents and a kind of semi-wonderful
So
mother.
this home movie footage that we have at the start of the film here was just a gift, dug out of boxes taken from Tracy's mum's home when Tracy's mum passed away by Tracy, and really not looked at since. In fact, when we had some of this stuff developed, Tracy had not seen this material before, so it was really an extraordinary experience for her to see these childhood memories of hers brought to life again. And for us, just a gift in terms of creating and reliving Tracy's backstory, starting with her halcyon days living near Reading.
My parents instilled in me a sense of determination. If you want something, you have to persevere. You can't give up.
And just a word here about the music, composed by Rob Manning and Samuel Sim. Sam Sim is a composer I've worked with many times before, and he collaborated with Rob Manning on this score. Really a fantastic score with tremendous range, incredibly sensitive, incredibly powerful at times, full of pathos and empathy for the material. Just wonderful sort of ability to underscore the experience of watching the film.
After a while, Mum came in. She said, Daddy's had a heart attack. The ambulance couldn't get here in time. And he's died. that night would change my life forever.
One funny story about this bit of footage is that actually what Tracy's dad had installed in the window was a tap that ran water without you ever being able to see where the tap came from. It appeared that the tap was suspended in midair, she told me later. That's what the people who were staring at the window are looking at. As she says, he was always inventing,
In the end,
always being
really,
creative.
she was pushed out.
This was my first experience of understanding that women didn't work in a man's world, especially at that time.
She had to do something to support us.
Unfortunately for us, she then met the man that she would marry. We sold the house in Reading and we moved down to Wales. The earliest memory, I suppose, is seeing her on the street.
Googling.
When we were
I remember the day we interviewed Jo in the studio. She was incredibly
only a
nervous.
small village, we didn't see new people around
She
very
really
often.
was uncertain about herself or what she would remember or her ability to speak in any way at all. And
Like
yet,
me, I suppose.
at the end of the interview, I knew we had a film.
She was quiet initially.
Her honesty and
I believe I'm saying
the
that about
simplicity
Tracy
with which she
Edwards.
explained things, the way she brought Tracy to life for us was just fantastic.
So we were really
and of
drawn
course, she has
together.
a key role in the film.
When you're teenagers, your friends are your family, really. They're the ones you trust. I know that her relationship with her stepfather was quite volatile.
This man was an abusive alcoholic. He hit me a few times. I always thought I'd asked for it because I was punched him first or kicked him or exploded in some way.
I just remember one occasion being there, and it became really physical. You know, and I was just shocked at that.
I turned from a happy, probably quite delightful child into an absolutely vile teenager, angry, aggressive. I hated everyone. I was suspended 26 times before I was expelled. My mother went in to beg for me to be able to take my O-levels, but then which I didn't turn up to. Instead of asking for help,
I think it was essential
I
for
ran
us to
away.
set up
I
Tracy's
went
childhood.
as far away as possible.
It's a little bit of a luxury in documentary terms. Often if you're making films for television, you have to get in there and grab the audience straight away, whereas we here were at least able to take the time to set up our main character so that everything else happens in the context of those struggles that she had when she was a child.
Exactly 3 years from today, the most grueling yacht race in
Bruno
the
Dubois,
world will begin.
skipper of Ruckanore, became the spokesperson for the sailors who Tracy was racing against, and he was just incredibly generous in giving us his interview and how candid he was.
They were pioneers.
And very grateful for people who step up and give these interviews.
It spells trouble.
A challenge like that as a yachtsman going around the world is something you had to do. It was a hell of a challenge.
It attracted the great sailors who wanted to prove something to the world. As a sailor, that was what you had in front of you if you want to succeed.
By intercutting these scenes here, we're suggesting that these are two worlds that eventually are going to collide. I think we wanted to give the promise of this other world that Tracy was going to encounter, even while following her childhood story on her adventures in Greece.
I didn't know anyone particularly well. My only contact with other human beings was going out and getting drunk. I do remember feeling quite lonely. I just wanted to go home, but I wouldn't let myself. One night a guy came into the bar and he said to me, I skip one of those charter yachts out there, and my stewardess has really left
Again,
me in the
these
lurch.
little
Do you
snippets
fancy
of
coming
Tracy
to work as a
that
stewardess?"
were recorded on Super 8 are just gold dust for us to bring
Next day,
that
we left to
young
go for
Tracy to
it.
life.
We were a real mixed bag of mostly dropouts, misfits and gypsies and nomads.
Obviously the texture and the colour of the film gives it a real
We're all running
sense
away
of
from
memories
something.
as well. another era, an earlier era.
But we were family units.
Contrasts again with the material that we come to later in the film, which is all shot on video.
I didn't see my skippers as men. I saw them as father figures, I think. I spent my first transatlantic learning how to sail properly. Sailing through my first storm, where they had to tie me to the wheels because the wind was so strong that they thought I was going to be blown overboard. Puking into a bucket next to the wheel, but loving it. For me, sailing was about freedom. It was freedom of everything. It was leaving everything behind. Everything that happened since my father died.
This is Antigua that we're looking at here, which is where Tracy ended up after her transatlantic journeys.
I knew that she was sailing, I knew that she was over in Antigua, and I heard little pockets about her. There was a bit of jealousy there, you know. Travelling was something I always wanted to do as well.
I was sitting on a friend's boat one day and I was just looking
So
through his
in
books.
film structure terms, I guess this is the inciting incident, the moment at which Tracy's life takes a turn, when she discovers this race, this incredible round-the-world yacht race. These pictures are from the book that Tracy pulled off the shelf that day. This is what she was looking at when her dream was born, I guess.
I wanted to be part of this.
That's Skip Novak there. Old school navigating.
I knew it was just something I had to do. The next day, I went to ask for a job as a cook on a Whitbread round the world race boat.
Here are the crew of Norse Data,
I remember going to the
one
skipper.
of those 1985 boats.
And he went, "We're not having a girl. We're not going to be the only professional racing team in the world with a girl on the boat. Girls are for screwing when you get into port." And then I went back and rejoined the boat. Oh, I was so upset. Then I was told we had this really important charter. We see this party coming.
Obviously, one of the things we've had to do here is truncate Tracy's story. She had done several transatlantic crossings and learned to navigate and done a whole bunch of other stuff, but she was still basically a steward on charter yachts at this stage when she met King Hussein.
We started chatting. So he said, "I'm fascinated with this world that you live in. You're like a Bedouin, travelling from place to place."
Tracy describes King Hussein as a collector of people, and she was definitely one of the people that he collected. He just spotted something in her, which is unsurprising to me, because when you meet Tracy, she is a remarkable character. But he spotted that determination in her and her potential, and supported her right through this whole experience. Without him, this would never have happened.
I had no doubt at all in my mind that I could absolutely make it happen. And the next day, I went back and said to the skipper, "I've got to be on this boat." I begged.
I was dictating my copy in a telephone booth, and there was this slip of a girl in the next booth to me, saying, Mum, I've got a ride on the Whitbread boat. I'm going to be cook."
Frank Boff, a man I remember from my childhood. Incredible cardigan there. That's what he used to get away with wearing on primetime television.
Last-minute preparations are hectic, not least for one of the youngest crew members, the cook on board.
Let's meet that cook. It's Tracy Edwards, the only girl on a British boat on the round-the-world race. Now, Tracy, what is the responsibility of a cook?
This is an incredible clip, which I love, because you get such a sense of Tracy's vulnerability, but also her chutzpah. She does a great eye roll in this clip, where at the stupidity of the questions she's being asked, all the while chewing gum, of course. Typical teenager, really.
So you're really a really major part of the crew, aren't you? Without you...
It's 2 weeks out at sea. Food seems to become a very important part of your life.
Tracy, thank you very much, and good luck around the world.
She was there to do the cooking and cleaning, basically. Everybody made it.
And this was the boat that Tracy started that race on, Norse Data, and she later transferred to Atlantic Privateer after a couple of legs.
Line between HMS Glasgow and TS Royalist to allow the start to take place. 10, 9, 8, 7,
all girls on that race. 230 crew, and 4 of them girls. I was one of them.
I don't think she really wanted to cook at all, but she did because it enabled her to go round the world on a boat.
Oh, it was awful. I was treated like a servant. They did not make life easy. At one point, they wrote on the back of my thermal underwear, "For sale, 1 case of beer." But I've never wanted anything so much in my life as to fit in with those guys. The cooking was horrendous. I loved the sailing. Well, when they let me up on deck. And then we won the leg.
It's just jammed as people have thronged down from the eastern suburbs all over Auckland to see Ironic Pilot down. There goes the gun and there's a tremendous roar. Horns going off across the Waitemata Harbour, and Ironic Privateer has taken the gun for line honours in the second leg of the 4th Whitbread.
The guys on the boat have been really, really good. They're very, very nice guys. A few of them had a little bit of reserve about having a girl on the boat and leaving their friends, but they put up with it gallantly. I thought, I'm not
interesting example there of Tracy putting on a brave face for the cameras, and then 25 years later you hear the truth.
As a proper sailor. I didn't want to go around again cooking for a boat.
Get a nice sense of dramatic irony from the way the fantastic editor that we had, Katie Breyer, has cut that.
If they weren't going to let me do that, I had to make it happen myself. And that's when I made the decision to put an all-female crew into the race. Well, after we got off the boat, I called my mum and I said to her, "What do you think about me putting an all-female crew in the next Whitbread Round the World race?" She sort of took a pause and then she said, "I think if you were truly committed, you would do it." She said, "But you've never stuck at anything in your life." Days later at Southampton boat
So it's worth saying that the first cut that we had of this film was over 5 hours long, and Katie just worked tirelessly to reduce that cut along with me, just winnowing it out and keeping the highs and the lows, the successes and reverses all the way through, but just making them as intense as possible until we had it down to about 2 hours, and then the cutting became painful to get it down to an hour and a half.
Men are going to say that they can't do it, and women are going to say that they can do it until time ends. So someone has to do it to prove either way.
Okay, looking at me. Okay, smiling.
Of course, Joe was the first person I called. That was my dream when I was a teenager.
And here the film opens up as we start to introduce the rest of the crew.
I could have was cook because I didn't have the racing experience.
Wonderful
so
1980s hairstyles, of course.
Yep, I know you can.
And a great tash there on Howard.
And then I met Howard.
Howard became a key member of the team.
I met Howard Gibbons. He became my project manager.
Howard was actually one of the first people we met when researching the project after Tracy. She introduced us to him. He was a linchpin of the whole thing. And again was incredibly generous in just terms of providing detail and background.
We wrote down, how do we do this? We interviewed very few people.
We went with him down to Hamble and saw the boatyard, and along with Tracy showed us around where everything had happened, and just gave us a flavour and a feel for the place. Of course, we couldn't have made this film without the cooperation of all the other crew and their generosity, both in terms of their time, giving us the time to come to London and be interviewed by us, because we made this film on a small budget and didn't have the capacity to travel the world seeking these women out, so we had to bring them to us. But also their generosity in terms of being frank and open and honest, telling the story warts and all. I think early on there had been a conversation, Tracy has told me, between them all about, okay, if we are going to do this, how honest are we going to be? And I'm very grateful that they decided that they would just trust me and tell the story as they experienced it, and allow me to treat them fairly, which I hope they feel I have done.
I'm the only one out here that's any good. And she literally said, "Come on, don't be so arrogant."
I happened to meet Tracy Edwards in a bar in Cork, as only the Irish can do. I just thought, God, I'd love to do it with them.
Particularly generous and brave, I thought, was Mary Claude Hayes, who obviously didn't complete the race with the crew and had a pretty tempestuous relationship with Tracy, but she stepped up to the mark and told the story along with everybody else. And interestingly, I think that quite rightly she wants to. She sees herself as part of this story and part of this journey. You know, without her, who knows what shape that boat would have been in, because she was, when they refitted the boat, the one with the only experience of taking on a job of that scale, or not even quite that scale, but building a racing boat before. So her expertise was absolutely essential, even if she didn't get to cross the start line with them. This clip is from a promotional video that Tracy made when she was trying to raise funds.
This was not an easy choice.
You can see her trying really hard to put on a professional face to make it look like a top-notch presentation. But this was in the very early days of video and editing.
Know that we will succeed in our venture.
Are you a feminist or?
Not at all. I hate that word. I hate the word feminist. I like to be allowed to do what I want to do. And
this is one of the most talked about moments in the film in terms of audience responses. Tracy really didn't at that age like the word feminist. It had all sorts of negative associations. But I think it's interesting that she says she's not a feminist and then actually goes on immediately to espouse a pretty feminist agenda. And it's interesting to see how her view on that changes during the course of the story.
We were a kind of rather unusual sideshow. There were skeptics in the press.
I thought, you know, first of all, where are you going to get the money? How are you going to get a boat? And how are you going to get it in the race?
I think we felt patronised. You know, we were all the little...
One of the things that shocked me about the archive material was that how pervasive the sexism was, how casual it was, how embedded in the discourse it was. And you see the sexist questions coming as much from women reporters, in fact in some ways more from women reporters as they do from men. So it really was, it wasn't just men trying to stop women, it was just the whole culture was set against the idea that women would be capable of taking on this challenge. And that really was quite a shock, because this was an era in which I grew up, and I must have been breathing that air at the time, and it shocks me to think that was the culture that I was consuming.
Preparation has been the key to winning past Whitbread races.
Money tends to follow men.
The bottom line of a maxi project for this fifth running of the Whitbread was close to $6 million.
You know, the problem start with was when you've got to find all the sponsorship to raise £1 million in sponsorship.
Yes.
I mean, how do you get that sort of money out of businessmen when you're this gorgeous slip of a young girl?
With great difficulty. It has been very difficult, not only to convince companies that all-female crew can do this, but that also it's something that they want to do, that it's something that fits into their policy of sponsorship.
Tracy's original plan was actually to build a boat to their own design, but that was so much beyond their resources, they discovered when they couldn't get sponsorship, that they had to come up with a different plan. This is them examining the plans with the boat's architect, but that was never to be.
There was that sort of unspoken...
And here's the crew working on a smaller boat that Tracy had, Shag, I think it was called, that was in Southampton, I think, and they just went out and did occasional sailing just to keep their hand in while they were hoping to put the project together.
Around the world fills me with horror. We had the one saying, we really love this, but it's just too much of a risk with adverse publicity if something were to happen.
It would be a tragedy, but we weren't doing it with the belief that we were going to die. We were doing it with the beliefs that we could sail around the world and do it competitively. You know?
Someone will step forward. This is too good an opportunity to be missed.
I spent 2 years looking for the sponsorship. We just couldn't raise the money. She was honest and said, we're living day to day.
Actually, it was borderline whether it was going.
Meanwhile, while they were waiting, the girls were all living in a house in Hamble, the pink house that they managed to scrape the money together to rent. So they were all there, just waiting and waiting, sometimes doing 2 or 3 jobs themselves, as well as keeping their hand in with sailing during the day, just waiting for this project to come together. So there was a great deal of trust and commitment on their part, even when it didn't look very hopeful.
We'll remortgage the boats, pay for the refit. She
put everything on the line, didn't she? You know, she put her home on the line. She risked everything, really, for it to happen.
The ship came into Southampton and we were there on the dock to see this quite scruffy-looking boat.
I have to say I was shocked the first time I saw these pictures. They are really quite extraordinary. I mean, the boat had holes in it. It had been picked up in a boatyard in South Africa. It had actually already done the round the world yacht race, so it had some pedigree, but it really was in shocking condition. And they had to have it shipped back. It couldn't actually sail back to the UK. They had to have it shipped back to the UK from South Africa.
I said, okay, get your overalls. We've got work to do.
You don't see women working in a boatyard.
But again, this footage shot by a local crew, local news crew, was absolutely invaluable to get the sense of them carrying out these jobs.
I wanted to roll, so I learned plumbing. I mean, if there's anything I could do was cope with bodily fluids.
I pretty much run almost every cable in that boat.
So Jenny Mundy, who you saw there saying that she ran every cable in that boat, has quite a remarkable story. Having done that and finished the race, Jenny went on to do a degree in electrical engineering and was, in fact, I believe, the only woman on her degree course doing electrical engineering. But she went on to have a very high-flying career, in fact, ending up, I think, working for Vodafone Europe at a very high level, all based on the experience that she gained rewiring that boat. So, in a way, Maiden gave birth to a lot of success stories, not just the success in the race.
I think we had no idea how much pressure she was under.
There was the negativity coming from the outside. The struggle for money was becoming really wearing. But it was my own insecurities that really were my biggest problem at that time.
The first time I heard Tracy told this story was at my daughter's elementary school, and one of the things that Tracy was keen to tell the children, these 11-year-old boys and girls who were there to move on to their next school, and she was supposed to be giving them an inspiring talk, one of the things she was keen to express to them, I was keen to keep in the film, which was that success, you know, sometimes is in spite of yourself. Sometimes the obstacles you face are inside yourself, and actually you have to dig deep and find that self-belief. And so I was keen that we followed through this story of Tracy's own inner demons pulling her down and pulling her back at vital moments. I think that's something we can all relate to.
It did feel self-destructive. But she'd always had that anger.
It really was, that was a really dark time.
This 58-foot aluminium racing yacht is currently called the Maiden Great Britain, but the crew still need £940,000 over the next year. No sponsor has yet come forward, and the project could be in jeopardy.
Without a major sponsor,
I always feel in this interview you can sense Tracy's rising frustration at not getting the backing.
If we fail this time, it won't happen again.
This was the point that I really, in total frustration, called King Hussein.
King Hussein arrived in Britain earlier this month for a sinus operation at a private London hospital. This morning he looked fit and relaxed at the Southampton boat show.
We kept in touch over the years. I would not have asked for his help if I could have seen any other way of getting to where we were supposed to be getting. And you just said, oh, for goodness sake, you've come so far, you can't stop now. Royal Jordanian Airlines will sponsor it, I'll sponsor it.
You see on the t-shirts there and on the boat that the original title was Maiden Great Britain, which was not a brilliant pun on a marketing campaign called Made in Great Britain. A little bit like Donald Trump's Make America Great Again, America First, an attempt to encourage home manufactured goods in the UK marketplace. Obviously, when the boat was sponsored by Royal Jordanian Airlines, that didn't really make much sense anymore, so they dropped the Made in Great Britain and they just called the boat Maiden, which seemed to fit perfectly.
September. He said, and when will you be back? I said, the following May. He went, more like October, dear. So that's the way they saw it.
It seemed like the further we got, the nastier this stuff would get.
They said it was impossible for us to get a boat. We've got the boat, and we've got the crew, and now we're going to go racing, and maybe we just have to prove that we can go racing.
With only a matter of days to go, nearly half the entries line up for a dress rehearsal.
Fastnet race was the big sort of curtain raiser because it was only a very short amount of time between the finish of that race and the start of the Whitbread.
By that point, I was having huge problems with Marie-Claude.
10 seconds left. The fleet races for the line. 5 seconds and all eyes are on the flag. The race starts the instant they dip.
So pre-race material on board the boat was very scarce because they only really adopted the cameras very late in the day. Fortunately, this was a race just before the start.
I'd pushed Tracy into sailing in an area.
And of course, this footage with Marie-Claude on board was equally valuable to us to tell this story.
It was like she held a mirror up to me, and I kept seeing myself as this person that couldn't skip with the boat. Outwardly, I was agreeing with her, and okay, fine, yeah, we'll do it like that. But I knew it was building up in me.
It was making Tracy question her leadership.
We were just about to get to the Fastnet Rock. The atmosphere was crackling with tension.
I went down below to look for a sail, and the boat jerked, and I fell and put my hand out to stop myself, and I broke my wrist.
Claire came up on deck and said, Joe's broken her wrist, we need to go back. And I went, well, no, nearly at the rock, morphine and strap it up. That's what I got the medical kit for.
The full kit and the splints weren't on board because I'd been told to take them off.
I went, what do you mean you haven't got the medical kit? She said, Marie-Claude told me not to bring it. I went, who is in charge of this boat? And she went, quite frankly, Tracy, we don't know.
So we had to abandon the race and go back to Plymouth.
I still remember how angry I was. I mean, I was so angry I was crying. I wanted to rip her throat out.
That was the final straw.
We got off the boat and I just said to Marie-Claude, right, that's it, I can't have you on the boat. And I fired her. And it was too late to rebuild it.
Been involved really 2 years by then. We were 3 weeks before the start. Of course I was distraught, I wasn't going to do the race. But at the same time I was relieved because I knew it wouldn't have been easy.
It was kind of like the media was waiting for this moment. Some of the crew wanted to leave. They had no faith in me.
Marie-Claude was a critically important person to me and to a lot of us. Yeah, I mean, Marie-Claude was a big loss.
I must admit, I did take a big breath in, because then I just thought, oh my God, who's going to steal this boat?
I begged them to stay. If you do the first leg and you don't think I can do this, I'll fly you home. But please, please don't break the team up now. I thought maybe she was right, that I couldn't skip with this boat, but I couldn't pull out. I just have to keep going forwards because I have no other choice. That's how we set off on the first leg. It was me pretty much on trial.
It's interesting that in this film, which is about a round the world yacht race, you don't actually get to the race itself until minute 36, 37. I guess in structural terms, it's kind of actually the midpoint of the story. And in effect, we brought Tracy to a very low point. Committed to this race, but absolutely insecure. All of her insecurities right to the fore. And then we remind everybody about the challenge of what they're about to undertake.
It was a bit of a daunting morning.
I didn't sleep much the night before, I remember. And driving down to Ocean Village and then walking into this overwhelming mass of noise and people and movement. if you're not on edge already, you are at that point.
Welcome to the Solent, where we're only minutes away from one of the most spectacular sights in sport, the start of the Whitbread Round the World race.
You're already rearing to go, I bet.
Obviously this is a truly international event with boats from all over the world,
It's been 3.5 years.
and had a global television audience as well.
Really didn't think we'd be on the start line. So,
And I think this is, as he says, one of the glorious moments when you see the scale of this armada setting off, supporting these boats as they undertake this incredible adventure.
Everybody hugging each other and everybody waving and cheering, and I just wanted to go.
Malcolm, we'll talk again in just a couple of minutes, but the atmosphere really building, as you say, because the boats are now leaving Town Quay.
This is the bow of Fisher and Paykel, just coming up to Rothmans, the British entry, skippered by Laurie Smith. There's Steinlager too of New Zealand, one of the favourites to win this race.
A load of us left the dock at the same time. You're looking to left and right, you're going, oh, there's Steinlager. And there's Fisher and Paykel, with all these legendary skippers.
On board Maiden, the helmswoman looking over there at Fisher and Paykel, the New Zealand catch.
The tension's starting to build now.
And Jenny Mundy there makes an interesting point, which is that this is in fact the first time, apart from Tracy, that any of them had set off on a round the world trip. So it really was, they really were a green crew. Mary Claude had been the only one with that level of racing experience, and she was on the boat at this. She wasn't on the boat at this stage, so their hearts must have been in their mouths.
They're trying as hard as they can. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, gun. They're off.
The 5th Whitbread Round the World Yacht Race is underway on the first leg from Southampton, England to Punta del Este,
You hear Fazizi get a mention there. Fazizi skippered by Skip Novak, one of our interviewees. An extraordinary story there. That was the first time a Soviet boat had entered the race. Their story could be the subject of a whole other film. It's extraordinary how they managed to put that project together. They arrived with KGB minders. They were watched every step of the way. They had a shell of a boat. They had to refit it, but all they had to refit it with was a shipping container full of vodka and sausage, which they had to trade for services and parts. But somehow they made it to the start of the race, and in fact had a great trip round. Unfortunately, they didn't do well on the first leg because they were still learning, and they were. Their skipper felt the shame and thought he was going to be sent back to the Soviet Union behind the Iron Curtain, and actually committed suicide at the end of the first leg, which was a very tragic incident that happened in the race.
When they left Southampton and all the press are gathering in their watering holes, somebody started a book. How far do you think the girls are going to get?
Well, we didn't think they would even finish the first leg.
Barry Pictall and Bob Fisher here being very candid about just how sexist they were in their attitudes, and we wouldn't have been able to tell the story had they tried to gloss over their memories. But they were very honest, and I appreciate them their honesty. It made our job a lot easier, and it helped really reflect just what the women were up against.
There was nothing to show that they would ever be really acknowledged for anything other than failure.
I love those period 1980s graphics. Reminds me of watching telly as a kid. You get a little bit of spot sync there from the crew, which was gold dust, because of course a lot of the time they were filming there was a lot of wind, a lot of waves, a lot of water noise. The sound quality on the boat was actually more of a problem than the visuals. So it's great when you get those little bits of moment bleeding through, and you can actually hear what they're saying to each other, and you just get a sense of the flavour of the atmosphere on the boat, just how good humoured it was. And I'm sure there were moments of stress, but I think the way they gelled together in this leg as a crew was absolutely crucial to their achievement.
They decided to come up with a full team of girls. It's not an easy one. We know by the fact that it was hard, girls together from Maiden.
We just lost Mary Claude. Jo wasn't there because of her wrist, so we had a different cook.
Yeah, I was gutted, absolutely gutted.
So, you know, it wasn't quite what we were all expecting.
There were 12 of us. Tracy, as the skipper and navigator, was out of the watch system, and Cook was out of the watch system. So the 10 of us were split.
This was the camera that they had mounted on the radar mast at the back of the boat, which was another advantage that we had. When they had started, it was actually the race organisers who asked for volunteers for crews amongst the crew to take cameras on the boat, and I understand that most of the male crew says, "Oh no, we can't do that. We'll be far too busy sailing to have a camera on board." And anyway, that's extra weight, and they had all sorts of reasons for not wanting to do it. But Tracy and the crew of the Maiden said, "Yeah, we'll do it. We'll try it. We'll try our hand at that." And actually, it was Joe Gooding who was the primary camera person on board, and Tanya Visser took a lot of stills, but Joe did the majority of filming, and she went away and did a 4-day course on how to operate this SVHS camera. And then they practiced with it just a little bit before the race, which I think you've seen some of the footage of earlier in the film. And basically they discovered that there were times when exciting things were happening, but it was just not going to be possible for Jo to keep filming, and because she would be required on deck to be sailing. And so that's when they decided to take a second camera and to fix it on the radar mast at the back of the boat. And that's where you get these shots like this one here, where you get that sort of fixed camera and you get a real sense of the way that the world is moving around the boat. Of course, Jo wasn't on this leg, so it was mostly Tanya who was doing the filming here, I believe. This footage was actually from a little package that was put together by the Whitbread for coverage of the race. I think originally it was taken from Punta del Este Tourist Board or something like that. But it was part of a package reporting on the race, and it was just irresistible for me as a filmmaker to include it, to show that level of casual sexism that existed. Just endless shots of women's bottoms to promote a tourist resort.
Within 7 hours of each other in the night of the Maxis. Eventually, after 36 days, the all-female crew finish in 3rd place in their class. Maybe they have a chance of finishing this marathon.
This was a real surprise to us all when they came in, and we thought, blimey.
Coming 3rd into Uruguay was actually a real disappointment. And we were gutted.
So Angela there getting a second birthday celebration. Her mum had brought a cake down and flown all the way to Uruguay to wish her happy birthday.
It's been a long 2 days. It's taken a long time to get in. The wind's dropped, and it just seemed like someone didn't want us to get here very much.
We saw ourselves as a professional sailing team who had entered a race with a goal to win it. The world saw us as a human interest story. Oh, and haven't the girls done well?
So word here about the interviews shot by Chris Openshaw, really beautifully put together with this backdrop. We shot them all in a studio in West London because we wanted to have complete control over the environment. These were very long interviews that we did with the crew. We didn't do huge, extensive interviews as part of the research process with the interviews. So we talked extensively to Tracy and we read everything. And I had a sense of the structure of the race, but the interview process was one where I wanted them to remember it fresh. So I took them step by step through the race, literally sometimes day to day, what happened next, what happened then. And a lot of them came in saying, oh, well, this interview won't take very long because I don't really remember very much. And then we'd still be there several hours later, them having remembered things they had forgotten that they had forgotten. And I think that gave a freshness to the interviews because they really were reliving those experiences again for the first time rather than remembering a story that they had once told. And I think that added to the immediacy and the impact of the interviews. So I was very pleased with the way they came out, and of course Chris shot them beautifully, and the use of iDirect gives you an intimacy with them as characters, and also made it easier for me as an interviewer because I felt like I was talking directly to them and holding their gaze right through the camera. So the interviews worked very well for us.
yachting journalist who referred to us as a tin full of tarts. Initially.
And it seemed to me an all-girls crew it fitted the bill quite well, and I was very scathing about that.
My coverage wasn't quite as chauvinistic as Bob Fisher's.
One of the joys of the archive is that you see in moments like this, you can see Tracy's frustration, really not feeling like this was the prize she wanted to get. She would much rather have had the Beefeater trophy for coming first in the leg. She's keen to get off that stage as quickly as possible.
And when we left Uruguay, I have never felt more ready in my life to take something on.
And here we return to where we started the film with this footage of the Southern Ocean and the sense of the menace and the threat and the danger that these women were taking on.
Sailing in the Southern Ocean is like nothing you've ever experienced before, and nothing will prepare you for it.
It's not a place that takes prisoners.
Some people call it the sea of certain death.
You're on your own. There is no hope if anything happens.
If you go over the side, your chances of being rescued are next to zero.
How are your crew feeling about it?
I think obviously they're a bit apprehensive. I think you'd be silly not to. You have to have a very healthy respect of the Southern Ocean. But I see them all very confident, very strong, and ready to go.
It just goes on day
Grant Dalton, the
after
Kiwi
day,
skipper of
hard
Fisher and
physical
Paykel, was a
work.
very experienced
And
sailor.
the guys are pretty fit. I think to a man they'd be much fitter than the other
And John
crews.
Chittenden here, who we wanted to introduce as a character because obviously his boat is going to be involved in a significant incident in this leg.
I don't know. Certain amount of trepidation, I suppose. That's inevitable.
What do you see as your main priority on this leg?
Obviously a deep irony in that comment and
I
a
don't
great
want to
degree
hurt
of
anyone
pathos.
or lose anyone. You know, that would take the thing out of it completely.
Have you got Joe back on board?
Yes, Jo's back, arms mended, and she's very happy to be back.
I was there with my bag ready to go. Take me to the Southern Ocean.
The second marathon leg to Western Australia charts the Southern Oceans, which threaten constantly changing stormy weather, freezing conditions
Peter
and
Blake,
icebergs.
legendary skipper.
Everyone's sort of a little bit nervous at the moment because we know the ice is well north. Where are the icebergs? Well, nobody knows that for sure. So it's a case of thinking who's going to be the boldest, who is actually going to get in amongst the ice.
The weather down there is very severe. I've seen a few weather maps, and I haven't seen lows like that ever before in the Southern Ocean. I don't think we'll see boats going very far south this time.
I was very clear that I was going to take a really southerly route, go as far south as possible.
The fleet are given a rousing farewell as they chart the new course.
If you imagine the bottom of the world, as far south means that you're almost doing a straight line, and that's the shortest route. There's always a risk in every decision you make, especially if you're making a decision opposite to what everyone else is doing.
I love this little bit of footage. Making light of the fact they're about to set off on this incredibly dangerous journey. Great score here from
It was
Rob
the
and
most
Samson.
extreme, debilitating temperatures you've ever lived in. -20 with the wind chill. That is really hard.
We didn't see the first two on the radar when you're doing 14 knots at night. That is a bit frightening.
I'll never forget doing bow watch. When it was really foggy, you did need a sacrificial victim at the front of the boat that would just hit the iceberg first.
Maybe this is the moment to admit that I myself am not a sailor, and I find the idea of doing this absolutely terrifying.
Barely last
And I think that comes through in the way that it's put together. I find this idea absolutely terrifying, being out there in these conditions, so far from land. I think they're incredibly
girls half an hour to get dressed and half an hour to get undressed.
By the time you got into your clothing, you really didn't have an awful lot of sleeping time, so you were getting quite sleep deprived.
On Crichton's Naturally, there's an early problem, a broken cap shroud that's cost them several days.
The waves are just huge. All you could see was a bank of water that you were going to sail.
This material here was one of the things that convinced me this was a great project for cinema. Seeing this stuff on a big screen, you really get a sense of the exhilaration and the power of the water underneath you.
Vertically down at the tip. And then, of course, you just start surfing,
And that's Jenny giving us a great example of the sort of thing that iDirect can do, where she pushes her hand right into the lens of the camera, completely by chance, completely by accident, but I knew when she did it that was going to make the cut.
I did really relish the hard adventure. I loved that. I loved those big seas. I love surfing.
I mean, just incredible that Joe kept filming throughout this leg in these conditions. I find it absolutely phenomenal. There's I think that's possibly Claire clipping on with the line. Which is how you stop yourself from getting washed overboard. You should be clipped on at all times.
And you can think you know it all.
What you hear here is Tracy calling all the boats to log their positions. They had what they called the chat show, where they would all be on the radio at a certain time just to check in. You couldn't actually use the radio very much because it used up power, and power was also used to generate fresh water, so communications were always kept to an absolute minimum. But every day they would dial into this chat show where they would report their positions. On this day they were struggling to locate Crichton's Naturally.
Tracy took the call on the radio.
John Chisholm and the skipper had a situation on deck. They lost 2 crew members over the side. You would have minutes before hypothermia sets in. You've got to turn these huge boats round and then get to people, which in itself is an incredible feat of skill.
I mean, I have to say, for me, it's just remarkable that Crichton's Naturally actually did locate these men in the water.
John Chisholm said they've both been recovered, but they didn't have a doctor. So Claire came to the radio and talked them through saving the life of one of them, Bart Vandendway. We sort of knew that there were 2 people involved, but we were only helping one. Anthony Phillips, they think, hit his head as he went over. He was floating face down in the water when they got to them.
Yeah, that was devastating. So devastating that he lost his life.
The ocean's always trying to kill you.
A difficult story to tell, but Katie's done an amazing job of cutting that so sensitively.
We couldn't afford to make mistakes. We were literally harnessed on from the minute the hatch was open.
The whole time you're aware that this tragedy has unfolded on another boat and they're still having to cope with it, and keep yourself safe and work your watchers and try and make the boat go fast.
Things just keep going and you just do it.
I mean, incredible strength of character really there, both on all the other boats and on Crichton's Naturally especially, just to keep going. But you have no choice.
It was a tough leg, for sure. I think it took 5 weeks.
We do not sail 5 weeks anymore in the Whitbread or the Volvo Ocean race. 5 weeks was long.
What I discovered in the second leg is that as a human you can go much further than you think.
A race like that is won and lost on its navigation.
You could see sometimes other boats and they hadn't taken their big sails down, and we had early, and then they'd catch up with us, but then the wind would kick in and we would be under control and we'd take off. I think that's when I suddenly thought, crikey, we actually could do really well here.
As we were coming out of the Southern Ocean up towards Australia, you're starting to see blue sky. The colour of the sea starts to change. It's like being reborn again.
Land smells, and you can smell it days and days out, and particularly Australia, all the eucalyptus and this deep, hot earth smell.
There's an interesting story behind the fact that they hadn't got any of the positions. Part of the gamesmanship, I think, of this race was that sometimes they would cover up their satellite transmitters, the boats, in order to hide from the others what their finishing positions were, in case that gave others a hint as to their tactics or their plans. So actually everybody was coming in blind, not knowing where the other boats were. And that's why it wasn't until they crossed the finish line that they actually learned that they were the first.
I mean, it was mega. It was absolutely mega.
The first time in 12 years, a British boat has won a leg of the Whitbread Round the World race.
As they crossed the line, the elation was obvious as the crew celebrated the victory many had said was impossible. And soon afterwards they'd replaced Maiden's sails with the battle flag that summed up the spirit of female defiance.
French boat l'Esprit de Liberté isn't due into Fremantle until tomorrow morning.
That was the leg we were all meant to fail, and then to have won it, and to have won it so convincingly, was more than anything.
I turned round and David Pritchard Barrett handed me the Beefeater Trophy.
I'd followed the Whitbread Round the World race since 1974, and I had seen these Whitbread
I love that you can see Sally here. Look at that cheer. It was great. I think that's a really good example of where they hadn't looked at the footage before they did these interviews, and yet it chimes so well with what we had seen in the material. It was so interesting to see them. But if they had just been describing the footage, it would have had a different quality. To getting them to remember it for themselves, getting them to conjure up that feeling and that sensation in their own minds, meant that they were so much more eloquent in their descriptions than if they had just been shown the footage and then remembered it from that.
Yeah, there's so nice. You spend 28 days, you don't have to wash, you don't have to dress properly, you don't have to do your hair. It's great. We loved it.
It was amazing.
What's the first thing you want to do?
Get drunk. Get drunk and eat a bacon sandwich.
My mum was standing there with this massive, beaming smile on her face.
It's fantastic. I hope my mascara's not running because I've just been crying and crying with pride, and I'm just going to burst, I'm sure. I can't believe that little
I absolutely love this
horror
relationship
grew up to
between
do
Tracy
this
and her
really
mother, Pat.
She's absolutely right.
Just so interesting, so complicated, so full of love and so supportive, and yet full of honesty at the same time. No easy solutions. And I think that's one of the very powerful strands in this story, that the way that they had their conflicts, they had their differences, they had their troubles. Pat wasn't easy on Tracy, and Tracy certainly wasn't easy on Pat. But how the love between the mother and the daughter came through, and they supported each other, and found such a deep sense of satisfaction in that.
These girls were beating the guys on the water, and they were looking a bit sheepish.
I think a lot of people wanted to dismiss it as a one-off. Lucky leg, yeah. I don't think we were seen as the boat to beat.
I remember thinking, why wasn't it
One of the
taken
things
seriously?
that Katie, our editor, was so brilliant at was finding these little moments of off-camera when there were these candid moments, and it could just allow you into Tracy's head for a moment, or into another crew member's head. Very difficult when we were really trying to cut it, not out of rushes, but out of cut news reports, because that material very rarely makes it to news reports. And when we found those little moments, it was gold dust.
Good start. The next leg started a couple of days.
In fact, assembling the footage was one of the biggest challenges of this project, because what would happen was that they would film during the course of each leg, and then at the end of the leg they would simply hand the tapes over to a local news organisation, who would then cut them up and copy them and distribute them to other reporters and news organisations around the world. They would get put into their local news reports, but then the tapes would just be discarded. There was no real collection. A few of them had found their way to what is now the Volvo archive, but really we had to start from scratch, going out to broadcasters all over the world, wherever this boat touched land, and see if we could pull that material back together again. And then we had a massive jigsaw puzzle of trying to piece the race back together. A fantastic challenge, but a very satisfying one, and meant that we looked at the material so carefully in order to ascertain exactly which leg each piece was from and where it fitted in, and meant that we found those little gems in there, like those unguarded moments that one might not have otherwise seen if it had all come in an easy single block to us.
One mistake could mean disaster.
A word here about the grade. Obviously, the film was the video was shot in wildly different conditions, and I tried to sort of find something that would bind it all together, that would contrast with the interviews that we had shot, and a look that really, for me, brought back the spirit and the colours and the palette of the late 1980s. So it's quite intense, it's quite rich. They're quite bright colours here, the blues and the reds. The greens and the yellows are all quite intensive. But for me, that's part of the charm of it, and really puts it in its period. It's we often think about film formats having their own feel, Kodachrome or whatever, but actually video has it too. And for me, that's one of the qualities of this film, is that it's very much a film of its era, relying as heavily as it does on material shot in the year that the story happened.
Constant stress. I started just sleeping in the nav station because it seemed pointless going back to my bunk. Most of us didn't sleep back the last 2 or 3 days. Just couldn't. For the last few hours, we were match racing down the coast of New Zealand. And then it got dark. Then we didn't have any more positions. There is nothing more scary than ghosting through the darkness, not knowing where they were.
We kind of thought by the time
Wonderful,
we got in,
tense piece of score here, just gently building the tension. I think Rob Manning and Sam Sim have done an incredible job on this passage.
Is that loads of little birds on the top of that wharf over there? What is that? And we realise it's people. It's people. Thousands of people. We crossed the finishing line, and that's when we realised that the spring was an hour behind us.
And as I look at this footage here, this is one of those instances where we found 2 bits of footage in different contexts, and you see the quality jump between one, actually in the middle of a shot, because we had actually stitched together a piece of footage, one which was low quality, taken off a VHS cassette, another of which was much higher quality, taken from a broadcast cassette, and that's the level of stitching together that we did. And I really have to give a big shout out to really my greatest collaborator on this project, Sam Brayshaw, who was with me right from the very start, who helped me put the story together, who helped work out the story structure and really drill down into what was most interesting and which of all the stories that we could have told out of this race, how this one was going to be the best one and how we were going to get to the heart of Tracy's experience. So, Sam was with me every step of the way, and one of the things I love about film is that it's a collaborative business. You cannot, or a collaborative art, should I say, you cannot make a film on your own. It's just not possible. And without the collaboration of Sam Brayshaw and Katie Breyer, Victoria Gregory, my producer, my composers and all the people involved in post-production, you wouldn't end up with a product like this. And that's why I love this business, because it pulls you together as a team. And there are lots of parallels between Tracy pulling together a team to sell around the world and pulling together a team to make a documentary like this. Took us exactly the same amount of time to put together this film as it did Tracy to mount her entry into this race, so the parallels weren't lost on us.
They were heroines, well, heroes they were, because they were regarded as men by that time.
You felt like a pop star, but you aren't. People at street say, "Hey, Tanya, we didn't know that people knew us like that."
Two Maiden girls are a lot
Obviously, structurally, one of the most interesting things about the film is weaving together these two stories of the success of the boat and Tracy's psychological state, which were linked but not completely in parallel. And this is a moment where Tracy's demons rise to pull her back down at a moment when she should be feeling her most confident and her most successful. She's beset by a lack of confidence and a sense of that maybe she's an imposter, maybe she's not up to this challenge, maybe she's the one who's going to let everybody down.
When kids come down to the boats and they know everyone's name, they know all the crew's name, they know what we all do, our job on the boat. It's really good.
I should have been now supremely confident that we could win the next legs. But actually, I was gripped by fear. I thought, if we lose now, I've lost this for us. But I was now more terrified.
So a note on the crew's dress here, because dress is about to come up as a very important element. They had one set of clean clothes that they put on just at the start and the very end of each leg, and that's why you see them in these uniforms. And one of the things Tracy was very, very keen on was that they shouldn't surrender their femininity in the interest of proving that they were capable sailors, but they should still try and look their best and look as good as they could. And I think that they didn't want to be apes of men. They didn't want to be mirror images of men. They wanted to sail, but sail as women, and I think that's one of the most important aspects of the story.
The race, really, the idea was that you'd build up a big lead, then you take your chances around Cape Horn.
Often I just sat there on my own in the middle of the night. Glow of the instruments, everyone's on watch, other people are asleep, re-going over everything, and I'll just have another look at that weather chart, and I'll just have another think about this. I overthought it, basically, and I put us in a really bad position to come up towards Cape Horn.
9 days and we haven't reached 11 knots. I'm pissed off because there's no fucking wind.
She just got more and more stressed, really. And was permanently sleeping in her chair. Yeah, she was exhausted.
Toasting Cape Horn there. Obviously a legendary moment, or a very significant moment for any sailor, the first time they round Cape Horn.
I could see the other boats doing well.
25th of February, and we're 10 miles away from Cape
I think for Maiden, actually, on this occasion, turned out to be a little bit of an anticlimax, as you can probably hear from Tracy's voice here. She's a little flat. They're not in the position they would want to be in, and instead of stormy, exciting seas, they actually had, were more or less becalmed.
And then there was, the possibility of some options opening up for us to be able to pick up some ground. So I decided to go for it.
Turning up and going up past the Falklands, it got a bit busy.
Dawn, the American sailor on board, to say that is quite something. She went on to captain a boat in the America's Cup. So she has done an extraordinary amount of sailing in her life, and for this to be one of the roughest passages that she's had is really saying something.
Seatbelt on every 10 seconds. It's just relentless.
boat.
Station calling Maiden. You're very...
I was in the nav station one night, and I suddenly realised my feet were wet. I went up and saw who was on deck, and I said, could you just have a look at this water? And by that point, it was up to the first bunk.
We couldn't figure out where the hell it was coming from. We had to stop the boat. Your mind starts racing, like aluminum boat, cracking mast, maybe there's a crack in the hull. So is there
Tracy tried to maintain calm throughout this whole thing, but she has subsequently told me that she was deeply concerned about their chances here. That she actually looked at breaking out the lifeboats. They had life rafts, and it was at this point that she realised that the life rafts were locked away. And so she asked, I forget which of the crew, but she asked one of the crew to just, without making any fuss, just check out how long it would take to break out the life rafts and unlock them from their cases. Obviously in the era now that wouldn't be the case, but it showed that their concern was real and genuine about whether they would actually make it through this passage.
At some point, clearly, your focus has to shift to, okay, do we need to do something more serious?
At one point, we called the Falkland
And again,
Islands,
just
and they
amazing that we have this footage of this event. Extraordinary, really.
They were on standby
Even of the
for me.
Hercules fly past, which came from the boat.
When you rebuilt it with your own hands, it gives you an intimate knowledge of the boat.
It had problems with hairline fractures in the mast, and clearly the pressure that the pounding sailing into the headwind had created had opened up those cracks and allowed water that was crashing over the bow to come in through those cracks and down into the hull.
That really scuppered their chances of doing anything in that leg.
Here you see Joe kneading bread. Fresh bread was one of the absolute treats, something that they did when they needed to cheer themselves up. They would make some bread in a stove oven, stovetop oven.
We'd had an overall lead of 18 hours, and we were now 16 hours behind.
Just a beautiful bit of editing there from Katie, where she just cuts those shots together to make Joe look at Tracy. Tracy's Katie's skill is stitched right through this film, just so beautifully put together.
Really took on a huge responsibility yourself for that.
But as well as just the cuts, the sensibility of that Katie brought to the film, her appreciation for these characters, for their vulnerability, for their strengths. I think it's absolutely, in every frame.
You cannot lie in the offshore sailing. It's impossible to lie. When you are 3 weeks, 4 weeks at sea, there's no chance. You have to.
And here we see a great example of Joe's portraiture. This is Joe Gooding, who did most of the filming on board, and she just had that emotional intelligence that told her that what would be worth capturing. Here she is, the camera turned on her, but she had the emotional intelligence to know that if you let the camera quietly linger on people, you would get this amazing material. And it contrasted very dramatically with what we saw from the other boats, the footage that was taken from other boats, which was much more. There were attempts at doing action sequences, or more often than not, just someone standing by the rail of a boat, giving a situation report, where they were geographically, what the wind was doing, what the weather was doing, and really you couldn't have made a film out of that sort of material. But Joe provided us with all this observational material, this cinema verite in a way, that just meant that we could bring these characters to life, that we could bring life on board the boat to the audience and give them the experience of what the race was like for these women.
All of the girls would have one clean set of clothes, and basically that was put on just before the finish line. Tracy comes up and says, how about we put on those bathing suits? Oh, well, which colour will I have, the grey or the white?
Harry Pictor's priceless reaction there, really giving the lie to this choice that they made to put these swimsuits on.
We're all up for it. Be a bit of a laugh.
Very difficult to navigate this particular beat in the story, because why shouldn't they wear their swimsuits, and yet at the same time they were playing right into the hands of the press, who wanted to see them as these babes, as the headlines say there, who wanted not to see them as sportswomen but to see them as objects. At a low moment, that's the step that they took, and Tracy's response was to go and get drunk, try and drown her sorrows.
I still felt awful. I mean, really awful. Everyone else wants you to be happy, so you smile. Maybe can't win, wear swimsuits. You have responsibility to your shorty.
Tracy saying there on camera, if we can't win, wear swimsuits.
Then you go to your hotel room, you burst into tears, and you drink a lot of alcohol.
Tracy admits she's made one or two wrong decisions on this leg, and yet it seems that the women stand by her and don't make a fuss about it.
No, she's the skipper, and what she says goes, and we'll always stand behind her.
We've been together for a long time now, and we're very close. We know each other very well, and it is a special crew.
And you've known Tracy for even longer, haven't you?
This is a very, for me, powerful interview that really sets up the deepest, perhaps, theme of this whole film.
And when you were 12-year-olds, did you ever talk about this?
No.
That through the support of the people around you, you can achieve great things if you follow your dreams, but only with the support of the people around you.
Sail around the world. Amazing.
The things that used to get talked about, the expectation of how we'd be, that we'd be a bunch of bitches, or we'd be, pulling each other's hair out and arguing all the time, just wasn't a true reflection at all. Actually, we were a great team. We won together as a team and we lost together as a team, but that didn't make it any better. I still felt miserable.
What she was thinking was, we can't win this race now. What I and others were trying to say to her was, you can't write it off, anything could happen. Anything can happen to any boat, like it's just happened to us.
One of the stories that we weren't able to include in the final cut was, as a result of their being so conscious about not taking any excess weight on this leg, that they kept their food to a minimum. But as we'll see, the leg ended up taking them far longer than they had ever anticipated, which meant that they basically didn't have enough food to last them for the leg. And they were right down to iron rations at the end, really going through every single piece of luggage, digging out every scrap of food that they could to keep them going, because if they had accepted food being brought onto the boat, that would have been deemed outside assistance, and so they basically had to finish the race starving. As they approached the end of the race, a boat came out from the English coast in the Channel and offered them some sandwiches, and even though they were starving, they couldn't accept these sandwiches because it would have disqualified them.
Optimism faded extremely quickly. There was no wind. This was a long, slow leg. Very few opportunities to do anything different from the other boats. The disadvantage of being heavier.
So far we've been out here an awful lot longer than we expected. It's been a very elongated leg, and I think we're all finding it a little bit hard to believe we are actually ever going to get there.
You cannot change the wind, you cannot change the direction, so we had to deal with it.
So of course one of the challenges with this story as a sports documentary is that normally sports documentaries, especially those about underdogs, which I guess is how you could see Maiden, is that the natural arc of that story is that the underdog wins in the end. But that wasn't the case in this story. Maiden didn't win the race. and yet they did pull off an incredible achievement, perhaps an even greater achievement than winning the race. So solving that particular narrative problem was really the secret to unlocking, telling this story in a film. But it was also important to keep alive in the audience's mind, I felt, the possibility that they might win right up until the last minute. And indeed, they were keeping that possibility alive in their own minds while they were doing the race. You never did know what was going to happen. Disaster could befall other boats at any point, just as it befell Ruckenor here, getting stuck on a sandbank. Unfortunately, Maiden, for their position in the race, weren't able to take advantage of that. But it did raise that possibility. For a moment, you still think, "Oh my goodness, they might just win it. They might just win it," because that is what we as an audience are expecting from an underdog story like this. But for me, that actually just adds to the power of the true end of the film, which is, of course, the revelation that winning didn't really matter. What mattered was what they had achieved as individuals, as a team, and for women around the world. That's what really made the difference.
It was really in the last few days that we realised we couldn't make up the time, that we weren't going to be first.
Again, in narrative terms, I guess this is the point you would say all is lost.
I was
absolutely devastated.
Heartbroken. I was just
nothing had been achieved. I think that's this is really Tracy at her lowest moment. And of course, what we're doing there is setting up the last act.
Nothing. I'd seen a glimpse of what we could do. We could have won. I was absolutely dreading the end. Oh, I just didn't want to go home.
For me, one of the interesting things about the difference between a television documentary and a feature documentary is that feature documentaries are really all about the last act. The whole thing is the whole experience delivers you to this last reel. And when we actually cut a version of this end quite early on in the process, and when Katie put it together and I saw it, I knew that this was what we had to build to. This ought to guide every choice that we made everywhere else in the film. And this was such beautiful material, such evocative material, such incredible footage that Joe had shot. Such an incredible atmosphere. We were fortunate that we also had the aerial footage to cut with it, and then of course we had the astonishing pictures of the end. So this was, in a way, although it comes at the very end, in a way it's the keystone of the film, this ending. We knew that's what we were building towards from very early on.
There was never an argument. I remember thinking, what a huge journey we've all been through. That amazing adventure would be over, And I'd miss those girls deeply.
We saw a boat on the horizon coming out.
A little tiny dinghy appeared with a couple of kids in it. Kids not very old, maybe 12-ish.
I think Nancy said, "Oh, there must be a race." And we said, "Oh, isn't that fantastic? They're starting early."
And they just came alongside and we said, "Hello." Hello. So you're just going to come up the solo with us?
And then we saw another boat. We thought they were going to motor past, and then they sort of turned round and started motoring alongside us.
And then more and more and more boats turned up.
Was no inkling. I mean, it was just surreal, the whole thing. Just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We didn't know, nobody told us that it would be like that. I remember the boat with all the photographers, and is that all for us?
It didn't make any sense to me. I actually thought there must be somebody more important coming up behind us, because it just didn't make any sense.
It's just that thing of disbelief, you know, just looking around at all these people that come out to see you. One of the boats has got all our families on board.
Okay, emotional there. Sorry, I wasn't expecting that. It was brilliant.
No one cared that we hadn't won. There was a bigger picture.
Whenever I watch this, I just can't help feeling how fortunate we were that these women were so articulate, so eloquent. And what a powerful perspective it is to have, to be making this 25 years after these events. That these women had taken this experience and stitched it into the very fabric of their lives and gone on to achieve incredible things themselves in their own lives, but also knowing that they had given a hand to other women around the world.
Michelle handed the wheel over to me, and as she was handing the wheel over to me, all the ship's horns in Southampton docks went off, and all the boats around us blew their horns. And the noise was... Sorry. The noise was just... It was completely overwhelming. It just really cemented that moment.
So I think something like 7,000 people had come out the previous evening to see the winning boat come in, and I think something like estimates are that 40,000 people had come out to the docks that day to see Maiden come in, which I think is just really testament to what they had achieved.
That was, without doubt, one of the great welcomes that any crew has ever had in the Whitbread race at all time.
We arrive in Southampton.
Wonderful beat of humility there from Bruno.
Hundreds, thousands of people on the dock. They were not there for us. It was a first step that Tracy made to show the world that girls could do a fantastic job. And it was an open door to other girls after.
I remember being deeply proud of Tracy, actually, and what she had achieved to get us there. She did it. She got us there.
Let's face it, without
I think I mentioned earlier one of those. This is another one of those little ironies where she gets the Yachtsman of the Year award.
Yachtsman of the Year.
Look at the little dot, ladies and gentlemen. This is Tracy Edwards.
Very, 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 very well done from the rest of the world.
The experience of sailing around the world with this sorry, amazing group of women. Just took everything to a whole new level in my life. They had a skipper that was learning on the job, and they taught me so much about myself. They allowed me to be who I was. You know, and I have some horrendous flaws, and they didn't matter.
Ladies and gentlemen, the first ever woman to receive the Yachtsman of the Year trophy, Tracy Edwards.
I think we interviewed Tracy over 3 days, across 2 occasions, and we really put her through the mill, but she delivered an astonishing interview for us. Unbelievably candid, unbelievably detailed, unbelievably insightful, and I think when we had done those interviews we knew we had the backbone of the film.
All I can say is that this should be a reward for not only myself but for
marvellous crew which I sail with, without whom none of this could have happened. It doesn't just take a skipper, it takes a brilliant crew, and that's what I've got. And I'd like to say thank you very much to them for believing in me enough to do the race with me.
I've worked with young people who have a dream, but
Joe went on to work with young people as a career as a counsellor,
and say, oh, well, what if I tell you a story about
it's another example of how this story filtered into the lives of all of these women, and I hope it's filtered a little bit into yours.
It did happen.